joining us. Let's see, gallery view, speaker view, here we go. Yeah, so thank everybody for joining. We have our very special guest here, Dr. Nicole Marcione, who is a world expert in longevity. She has her Ph.D. in Biokinesiology from USC, and she'll explain later. She also has a really interesting background as a Pilates instructor since 2005. So she knows how to incorporate exercise and mobility to promote longevity. So I'm really excited. Nicole's been coming to OsteoStrong for, I think, about 2 months now, about that. And also your mother-in-law. And your mother-in-law, love her so much. Such a Spitfire Italian lady. And
everyone meatballs. Well, maybe not everyone.
More meatballs. Yeah, making more meatballs. And yeah, no, it's she's been great, and she's definitely improved a lot in her just overall strength. And we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce yourself and people who are attending right now. You can ask questions, I think, throughout. Put it in the chat, and as Nicole is presenting, we'll address those questions. And then we'll save about 15 minutes towards the end to ask if you have any more questions to ask, then we can address those. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming on in the evening right around dinner time. If you start to eat, that's perfectly fine. I won't be offended if anyone is nibbling while we talk. So yeah, I love to talk about longevity. A lot of people don't realize that how we age is 80% lifestyle and only 20% genetics. And so when we think of it in that way, we realize that a lot of the decisions we make have a huge impact, and that whatever our families may have had happen, our parents or grandparents, aunts and uncles, isn't necessarily our own destiny. And we might be at a higher risk for something. However, it doesn't mean that it's going to definitely happen depending on our lifestyle. And that could be either for the good or for the bad, right? And so a little bit about my background. I was a Pilates instructor since 2005. I had a lot of older clients, and that piqued my interest on the aging process and how how our actions and behaviors impact our aging process. So that led me to go back to school to USC, where I studied gerontology. At the bachelor's and master's level, I got involved in research and decided to keep going. And for those of you who don't know, gerontology is the study of aging throughout the lifespan. So that's a little bit different from geriatrics, which is like the study of diseases at a later age. So that's the difference between the two. And so I went on to go on to my PhD in biokinesiology, where my focus was on how mind-body exercise affects mobility and cognition in older adults. So I had a real interest in the brain health aspect of it as well. So with that, because we are such a small group, if you want to interrupt me at any point, please do. Hey, Samantha. I'm going to share my screen, and I just have a few slides, but again, you can interrupt me at any moment. So if you have a question, or write them down and we'll address them at the end. Okay, so let me pull this up. Let me get to the beginning.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it? Okay, perfect. So if you don't already have this information, I know a few of you do, please write it down and connect with me. You feel free to email me at any time. If you're on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Nicole Marcione. I try to be educational on my Instagram account, and sometimes fun as well, but it's usually more educational than fun. But we do throw the occasional dance party because dancing is good for our bodies and our brains. So we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of longevity. Now, these are by no means exhaustive. However, throughout my years of study and research, these are the things that I've been able to distill down in to these four main pillars, and they're pretty easy to remember. And I find that the more simple we can be with our health and wellness, the better. If we tend to get too complicated, then we become overwhelmed, and a lot of us just say, forget about it, I don't want to deal with it. So when we can simplify it into some easy steps to remember, then it's much easier and more doable to move forward. So I want you to think, what if you live to be 100 years old? That might be in 40 years from now, that might be in 25 years from now, whatever your age is. What if you live to be 100 years old? What would that look like? How would you plan for it? What habits would you have to change today in order to make living at 100 a life worth living? And who would still be in your life, or who would you hope to have still in your life? You know, all of us know people who have aged either well or who have aged poorly. So I want you to take a moment, if you feel safe, just like close your eyes and think about someone, one person that you know that you think has aged extremely well, meaning they're independent, they're mobile, their brain function is intact, etc. And then I want you to think about someone who hasn't aged well and what that looks like. So you have both these people in your mind. And now I want you to think, how did they live their life? Like, what do you think helped them to be in the situation they are right now? Because I'm sure the one who has aged well, who maybe is a model for how we want to age, didn't get there by accident. And the other person who's not aging well didn't get there by accident, or maybe it was just by default because they didn't put effort into, you know, what they were, how they were going through their journey of life. Now, at this point, I always get someone who says, oh, but Nicole, I know someone and they lived to be 101 and they smoked every day and they drank and they, you know, all these things. Yes, okay. There are those outliers, and there's also the other end of the spectrum, right? Oh, I know someone, he was or she was like in their fittest shape, you know, Olympic athlete type, and they died when they were 45 of cancer. Okay, yes, I will say there are always those outliers, but in general, those who age well have certain characteristics for them. So does everyone have kind of that person or persons in their mind? Yeah, does anyone want to come off of mute or type in the chat box, like it doesn't need to be who they thought of, but what were the characteristics that made them think one or the other, and maybe what led them to it? Quickly, anyone? You could just unmute yourself. If not, if everyone's going to be shy,
I can do it.
Oh, please, Karen.
Okay. So I was thinking about a friend who I just received a picture of, and she didn't age well. And I think while she had a lot of good things going for her, she neglected her self, her body, not her mind, definitely, but her body, and her body broke down. Even though her spirit and her mind worked longer. And at this stage, she has dementia and is just in that stage.
Yeah.
But, you know, we started out as contemporaries, and yeah, I was thinking about her today. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And definitely we're going to talk about it's very holistic, right? We can't just focus on one aspect or another. It's really an entire picture. Some of the comments are like eating well, no smoking, working out, hydration, that's huge. Keeping active, good social networks, good nutrition, Oh, and this is good. Samantha says someone that didn't age well carried a lot of anger inside her all her life. Yes, we'll be talking about the stress. Stress is a major factor in longevity. You can eat all the kale and lift all the weight, push all the osteo-strong you want. But if you are eaten up by stress, you know, this is all these other things can't really compete with that. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. All right, so our first one, and like I said, these are going to be very simple because I want you to be able to take them away and implement them as easily as possible. So pillar number one is movement. Now, people always ask me, Nicole, what is the best type of exercise for aging? There's got to be one. Come on, give me the goods. Like, what is it? And a lot of times they'll want me to say like Pilates, and then Brian will want to say like OsteoStrong, right? Like it's whatever, you know, whatever you're selling or believing in, right? And the answer actually is whatever you enjoy and that you will do consistently. So I could preach all day long about the benefits of Pilates or tennis or weightlifting. But if you don't like it, you're never going to do it. So it's not going to matter. So I encourage everyone to find something that doesn't feel like a chore or a burden or a requirement or something you just have to do because you have to do it. But if you find something you love, then it's going to be something you know are wanting to do, thinking about, figuring out how to fit it into your schedule. So that's the number one thing. What do you enjoy and what can you be consistent with? Every single day. Okay, movement every single day. Now that doesn't mean you have to do a formal structured workout every day, but we do have to do some sort of movement, especially if you are at a desk or you sit a lot, maybe you drive, whatever it is. If you have a sedentary job, it's even more important that you're moving and moving throughout the day. So at least get up for 5 or 10 minutes every couple hours. You can do some jumping jacks, you can do a little dance party, you can do just some stretches, move around, shake. Even shaking is really good for our bodies. The second thing, and this is a lot of my background with my research, is what we've termed cognitively complex physical activities. Now that's a mouthful, cognitively complex physical activity. So I want you to think about if you've ever been on a treadmill or riding a bike or a Stairmaster or something like that, or elliptical machine, and usually you watch TV, or you read a book, or you're listening to a podcast. Now those activities, the physical movement, are good for us. They're good for our fitness. They help with our cardio, but they really don't do much for our brain because our brain can be doing something completely different than know what our bodies are. And actually our bodies are pretty automatic when it comes to locomotion, like walking or running or riding a bike, anything that's kind of cyclical, right? Our bodies can do that. In fact, studies in the 70s, poor cats got the short end of the stick, but they would do studies where they would basically cut the spinal cord. They would separate the brain from the spinal cord, and these cats would still be able to walk on treadmills, showing that our brain really isn't involved in walking or things like riding a bike because it's very automated. When we think of cognitively complex physical activity, there's a few things we want to incorporate. So one of these would be, do I have to know where my body is in space? For example, when you are playing tennis, you need to know your boundaries. You need to know where your body is in space because that racket has to hit the ball. Also, you are reacting to a partner. So that's something else that's cognitively complex. Dance, choreography, where you have to have certain steps with a certain movement to music, right? Pilates is another one, golf, surfing, anything where you're having to incorporate your breath with a specific movement. So we want you to think of, there's a host of them, but if you can incorporate a cognitively complex physical activity into your weekly routine a few times a week. That's really important. They find that there's all the benefits that you get from exercise is exponentially more when you are involving your brain as well as your body all at the same time. All right, so I don't know if any of you on here currently do any sort of activities that would be considered cognitively complex. If so, you could put them in the chat. And you probably never thought of them as being cognitively complex, but when you break them down, it actually is very, very involved with your brain functioning right along with your body.
Could I just ask you real quick? I had somebody at the door and I had to do it, so I missed what you were talking about. That all about the cognitively complex physical activities.
Yes, so this is a type of exercise, Mona, that you have to involve your brain in order to, so it couldn't just be like riding a stationary bike or being on a treadmill while you're reading a book or watching TV. It would be something that you're either, it involves a partner that you have to react to, you have to know where your body is in space, maybe the environment, like surfing, you have to know your environment. Yeah, so
like playing your guitar or painting would be cognitive. Well, painting not so much, but it's using
that's definitely a great way to get your brain. But we're talking about movement. So maybe something, I mean, I know when you're playing the guitar, you're moving your fingers, but something a little more global with physical activity. But that's excellent. Yes. Novel activities and learning in a way like that is definitely good for our brain. So hiking, yeah, kayaking, motorcycling, no, because you're not really moving your body. It definitely, your brain is engaged. I don't know, some may argue with that. I know there's certain people. Biking, so, and Brian wrote cycling. So I would say yes, if you are outdoors, right? Because you have to pay attention, especially if you are in a group and you're on a street, for sure. That's cognitively complex. However, your body is still pretty much in an automated state, right? Your legs are doing the same thing. You're not on another plane of movement unless you're crashing, which we don't want to do, right? Pretty much it's the sagittal plane of movement is one way. So
ping pong work?
Ping pong's huge. Yeah, that's definitely one. Boxing, yes. Sex, yeah, I guess so. I didn't really think of that, but it could be. Depends on how much you move around, like how active
you move around a lot, but you hopefully are using your brain too, if nothing else than to keep score.
Right. All right, so you guys, you all get the picture. Pilates, yes, like I said, I'm a little bit biased. You definitely need to know exactly where you are in space as you're going through this. Now, why do we want to exercise, and particularly exercise in a way that involves our brain? Again, this goes back to longevity. It's because of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity means our brains are malleable. They can change. Just like you can shape plastic in any sort of shape, our brains, either for the good or for the bad, can change. And one of the number one things out of everything you can do to encourage our brains to constantly be changing, and I'll go into a couple different aspects of neuroplasticity, is exercise. So 3 main things. One is called neurogenesis. Neuro, N-E-U-R-O, genesis, meaning new birth of new neurons. For a very long time, scientists thought we were only born with a certain amount of neurons and that was it. In the last 15 to 20 years, first in mice models and then through animal models, and now they can see even in humans, we actually, adults, produce new neurons every single day in our hippocampus, which is our part of our brain that's responsible for memory and learning. However, if we don't nourish those neurons, new neurons, with exercise, with low stress levels, with good food, those neurons, they don't stay neurons. They become support cells called glial cells, and they go on their way. So when we exercise, we're able to keep those new neurons. Now, new neurons are no good if they're not talking to the already existing neurons. So the second part of neuroplasticity is called synaptogenesis. So you've heard of synapses, which is the space between neurons where they communicate to each other. Well, when we exercise, our neurons make more of these connections. So it's kind of like if we're all based in LA, if we only had the 405 freeway, we all know how horrible that is during traffic. So when there's other roads, we're able to, traffic's able to go more freely. Well, our brain is the same way. We can have either few connections or many connections, and we want to have as many connections as possible. It's called redundancy. So if one isn't quite, freed up, we can have other ways of our brain talking to each other, areas of our brain talking to each other. And then the third way of synaptogenesis is, neurogenesis, synaptogenesis. And then another way is important through exercise. It produces more what's called, and these are big words, brain-derived neurotrophic factors. So for short, you can just Google BDNF, BDNF. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor is basically like fertilizer for our neurons. And there's something that we don't know yet what the mechanism is, but there's something that happens in our muscles when we exercise that triggers the production of this BDNF, and it gets to the brain, and then our brain produces even more. It's really fascinating. So daily movement, making it cognitively complex, and neuroplasticity is one of the main reasons why. All right, I realize like time goes fast when you're talking about things you love. Okay, so let's move on to pillar number 2, nourishment. Okay. For every single type of eating, for every fad diet, for every trend, there will be evidence that supports it. Okay, nutritional science is all over the map. So what's most important is knowing what works in your body. Now, there are a few universal truths, which is we probably all need to be hydrating more and eating healthier fats, right? Like avocado, olive oil. I'm a big proponent of extra virgin olive oil. Up to 1 liter per week is what studies have shown in Mediterranean diet. Helps with our brains, it helps with our joints, it helps with all kinds of things. And eating less sugar and processed foods. So no matter what type of eating patterns you tend to lean towards, whether it's paleo or keto or vegan or whatever the diet du jour is, these are a few universal truths, right? Less sugar, less processed foods, more water, and healthy fats. People tend to leave healthy fats out of their diet, and I don't want people to be scared to bring healthy fats into their diet. Now, it's important that no matter what we are taking into our bodies, we need to be making sure that we're absorbing those nutrients. And how do we know that? Is through our gut health. So gut health, it's a big topic now. And the reason is because researchers, doctors, people are realizing that everything starts in our gut. Inflammation is the foundation of disease and a lot of aging. It accelerates aging. Inflammation usually starts in our gut because we will eat something that our body sees as either toxic or an invader. And when that happens, it puts our systems on a high alert. Now, I'm not going to tell you, oh, stop eating X, Y, Z because they cause inflammation. I don't know what causes inflammation in your body. You have to either be very intuitive in what you're eating and notice if you eat something, do I feel bad? Am I bloated? Do I get itchy? Do I get cranky? These are all things all symptoms of our gut telling us something is wrong. Do I have brain fog? Or you can take a food sensitivities test, which I highly recommend people do. There's a lot out there. So if you really want to talk more about that, you can email me and we can talk more. I did this last spring. And here's the interesting thing. I was highly sensitive to blueberries, carrots, and romaine lettuce. Now, most of people would think, well, those are healthy. And they are for most people, but for my system right now, it's putting my system in high alert and causing a lot of inflammation. As soon as I took those out, I started feeling so much better. It was really crazy. So that's why I say, I'm not going to say don't eat gluten, don't eat dairy. These are like kind of the high level inflammatory ones that most, if you go see a nutritionist, will say to stop eating. But there could be, you know, something that seems pretty harmless and healthy, like romaine lettuce. Who would have thought romaine lettuce? Like none of the other lettuces are bad for me. But going to find what the sensitivities are for your exact body, and then being able to remove those will really make a huge difference in your gut being able to function well. And this is a whole other topic. Like you can have a whole 6-month course on gut health. That's another thing I love to talk about. And maybe Brian will have me on another time. We'll talk more about gut health. Another thing that's really helpful for nutrient absorption is to chew slowly. I know this seems like so basic, but most of us inhale our food. We chew it maybe 3 times, we gulp it, and then what happens? We take a big jug of a glass of water and like push it down and shove it down. And that's one of the worst things we can do for our digestive system. So if you can slow down your eating, chew more, and then drink less water with your meals, because the water dilutes your digestive juices. And when those are diluted, then our body's not able to absorb what it needs. And then this third one, intermittent fasting. Again, this is another topic that could be an entire hour in itself. But the basics of why it's good for longevity is intermittent fasting. And there's all types of intermittent fasting. So you could not eat for 16 hours a day and only eat for 8 hours a day. You could not eat for 12 hours a day and then eat for the other 12 hours a day. So there's different windows in a 24-hour period. But there's also the 5 to 2 intermittent fasting, meaning for 5 days you eat normally, and then 2 days a week you limit yourself to like 600 calories. That's another type of intermittent fasting. Or there's even another one. It's called, it's by Dr. Walter Longo, who is one of the leading researchers on intermittent fasting and longevity. And he has a 5-day, it's called fasting mimicking diet. Again, if you're interested in any of this, you can just send me an email. I'll get back to you. But for 5 days, you're on a very low caloric diet, but they have found that being on this fasting type of diet for 5 days actually mimics if you were to completely like water fast for 5 days. So they've been able to study this. So what happens when we fast? Basically, it's a phenomenon called autophagy, which I have written up here, autophagy, which means self-eating. So our bodies are amazing at healing and repairing themselves when we give them the chance. So what autophagy is our cells basically get eaten up if they're no good, right? So if a cell is damaged, it will get broken down and parts will be either reused, recycled, or gotten rid of. That's how our body works. If we're constantly eating, if we're constantly under high levels of stress, if we're not sleeping, all of these things, our bodies will not enter this state of autophagy. And what happens when you get a buildup of damaged cells? Disease. And it could be in many different ways. Cancer is one of them. But this is why intermittent fasting is a really great way to promote longevity in our lives. Now, there is one caveat, and in particular with women. Men have a much easier time intermittent fasting for 16 hours. Women, not so much. A lot of it is based on our hormones. So there's a protocol by Dr. His name is Dale Bredesen. He's a leading researcher in the field of Alzheimer's. And part of he has a huge protocol on how to reverse Alzheimer's disease, but part of it is what's called 12-3. So it's fasting for 12 hours, which is pretty, like most of us, that's doable, right? You wake up, maybe you eat at 7, you have breakfast at 7, and then you eat dinner before 7 p.m. But the second thing is the 3 part, and that is not eating within 3 hours of going to bed. And this is for our brain health. Because if we are constantly eating, our bodies aren't able to get into that repair mode because they're always digesting. So I highly recommend, if you don't do anything else, try this 12-3 protocol. And then if you start feeling fine on that, if you want to lengthen that 12-hour fast to 14 hours or 16 hours, fine. But again, if you're female, you want to be aware of if it's making you feel bad or not. And even certain times of the month, if you're still on your cycle, that's another thing that you need to think about as you do this fasting. Okay, so pillar number 3, connection. So most of us think about diet and exercise, right? What do I need to do? Diet and exercise. But connection is one of the main things for longevity. In fact, there was the Harvard study that came out a couple of years ago now, which you may have read about or heard about if they had like NPR stories. And basically it was how social isolation, we talk a lot about social isolation right now because of COVID, but before COVID, the gerontology community was talking about it a lot because it affects older adults on a much bigger level than the general society or general population. But social isolation, they found, is worse than a lifetime of smoking as it pertains to mortality. So if someone was lonely and socially isolated, they had a higher rate of mortality compared to those who smoked 15 cigarettes a day. Now that is a big finding. And that just shows how humans are meant to be in community. And we're meant to have something other than ourselves to connect to. So this could be relationships with humans or pets, because some of us aren't like big on humans, but we're big on pets. So pets count that relationship. It could be family. It could be a partner. It could be children. It could be friends, close friends, right? But some other person or pet in your life that you are able to find connection with. Super, super important. The next thing is a connection to, yes.
Yeah. So one thing, I mean, I'm a big hug-a-bug. And when COVID hit, it's like, I miss giving hugs, right? Raise your hand if you miss giving hugs to people, right? It's like, so used to seeing friends and just hugging them. And I totally miss that. And when COVID hit and we had the lockdown, I mean, I'll be honest, like in April and May, I was going through depression because I wasn't able to interact as normal with other people and seeing smiles and hugging and high-fiving and all that stuff. And just like, we're in lockdown. And yeah, I mean, it took a lot out of me. I didn't realize, like, okay, it's like 50 cigarettes a day then. It's like, oh, it's that bad.
15, not 50. But
okay, 15. Okay. All right. I can keep smoking then. All right. But yeah, it's like this isolation it affects us. We are humans. We need to interact as a community.
Yeah, for sure. And you are not alone. So when we interact with people, and then when we actually physically touch someone, hugs, holding hands, anything like that, it actually has, we produce a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin helps us feel good. And it brings us that sense of connection and purpose. And so, yeah, that's why a lot of people right now, specifically, like, I don't know if you've noticed, I listen to NPR a lot, but even on news, like, they're talking a lot about mental health and mental wellness, much more so than in the past, and how it's really mainstream. There's not there's hardly any of us who have gone through this time that haven't felt a bit how you've felt. Either, there's a continuum, whether it was a little bit or a lot, but we definitely need connection. And I know people also that who, were living on their own that actually went out and got a pet. And I think shelters had a lot of pets adopted during this time because it was able to fill that need for connection. So yeah, connection is huge.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that too. Like I had joined Body and Brain Tai Chi in January, and it was so great. And you when you come out of the class, you feel so good, and you smile, and you want to hug everybody, just like he's saying, and it was just beautiful. And then when we got locked down, of course we aren't allowed to go there anymore, but they started it online, and it was still nice to have that, every day. But now it's like it's not the same as being with everybody. And now I'm really into all these other classes that I take on YouTube, and I'm going to the gym outside 3 times a week. And I find myself bored with that. I've almost quit taking the classes, although I'm taking a brain education class tonight at 7:30. But as far as the classes, it just sort of all the loving feeling, the warmth, the energy is gone, and you get bored with it, and it's just not the same. And I signed up for that for 3 years, and I don't know if they're ever going to let us out of lockdown. It's crazy because it's like this is causing much more problems than if. And they don't even know that this isolation is doing anything. They don't really know anything about the mask. You can have somebody in the same room with and without masks, and if the virus is around, they're both getting it. So it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Online just is not the same. It's nice in some cases like this education, but physical and the feeling of interaction with people is completely gone.
Yeah, it definitely, you hit the nail on the head, and feeling that energetic exchange, right? And so even if we're in a class, so there's Samantha who's on here, her and I used to do a workout together in person, and it was very energetic, and still do it online, but it's just it's not the same as being in person. So we kind of have to figure out how can we try to create that if we're missing that, and if we can be in some sort of group setting, even if it is on Zoom. Obviously, we're not going to be like this forever, but we need to be patient and find ways to bring this connection. Another way
they're going to get rid of is the gym. That's going to be next. They closed it down twice now, and that's important. Yeah. That's your physical activity. That's your socialization. Your energy. Everything. That and they take that away.
Yeah. It's difficult for sure. We're all feeling it, Mona, that's for sure. So going back to connection, also outside of relationships, is connection to a meaning or purpose in life. So this could be a connection to the universe. This could be connection to God, if you're religious. This could be even connection to just having a sense of belonging and something outside of yourself, right? That you're part of a bigger, greater picture of things, whether that's your neighborhood, your community, the universe, or you can make it as micro or as macro as you need. But this is another big part of longevity that they found in both empirical evidence, which is like running trials, and in epidemiological studies, which is studying groups at population levels, or if you're familiar with blue zones, things like that would be considered like epidemiological. Okay. I'm probably not saying that right. Anyways, so finding more meaning and purpose in your life, and that's going to help us to live longer. And then lastly, connection to nature. This is when a lot of us leave out, especially if we live in cities, to spend time in nature There's a whole field of study called biophilia. We have someone on here, my friend Hillary, who is an expert in that area. And if you can't be in the woods, try to bring the woods to you, whether it's plants or go to a park. So what biophilia is, it's the study of nature on our physiology. And so what has been shown is that when we're in nature, it lowers our heart rate, it lowers our blood pressure, it increases our immune system activity in a good way. It helps us to make more natural killer cells, they're called. So we want these natural killer cells. They're kind of like the guards that go around our body looking for bad invaders to get rid of them. And so nature, when we're out in nature, it produces these things on our bodies. Now, most of us realize that we all feel better. Like, who goes into the woods and is like, oh, I really feel like shit? No, most of us go into the woods and we're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I love it out here. So we know that, but now there's the research to back it up. So there's a lot of information online if you're more interested in that, in what's called biophilia. And then we're going to come to our fourth one, restoration. So how we restore our bodies. And this goes back to some of the earlier comments on when we were thinking about someone who aged well versus someone who hadn't aged well. And I think it was Karen Patterson, you said the person that you were thinking of didn't take care of herself, like had self-care. So 3 big takeaways. One is sleep. It is now known if you are sleep deprived, you most likely will get dementia at some point. Sleep and our brain are intertwined so closely. Part of the reason is that when we sleep, and this is a really cool thing, and it's pretty new. I want to say 2015, maybe the article that came out was 2014. Scientists found out a thing called the glymphatic system. I'm going to type it in the chat box if I can find my chat. There it is. It's like lymphatic, but with a G. Basically, let's see if I can type it correctly, glymphatic system. So basically, it's like a car wash for our brain. When we sleep, our brain literally shrinks by 18% to allow for room for more fluid to come in and wash our brain. So this fluid brings in, it's called cerebral spinal fluid, brings in more nutrients, but even more importantly, gets rid of all the toxic junk that our brains hold on. Now, our brains are extremely metabolically active, meaning think of like a race car, right? Or some sort of machine that has an engine. And what does that engine produce? A lot of exhaust and other junk that it needs to get rid of. Well, our brains do the same thing. It has a lot of metabolic waste because it's very highly active. So when we sleep, our brains have this washing going on. If we don't sleep or we don't sleep well, we never get to the point where our brain is able to go through that process. And so now they're finding that, and actually I just heard on NPR yesterday, there was a story, a new study that came out that when we sleep, this glymphatic system helps to break down proteins called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid are what is thought to be part of when someone gets Alzheimer's disease. Yeah, it's really interesting, Karen. So beta amyloid turns into plaques. Normally these proteins, we're able to cut them down, like chop them up, and they never gunk up. But if we don't sleep well or have other things like stress and other related poor behaviors, our body isn't able to take care of these proteins and they become sticky, like plaque on your teeth. But this is plaque on our neurons, and those plaques eventually kill the neuron, and then that leads to Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. So this is the number one reason why sleep is so important for longevity. Also, it's a time for our bodies, the rest of our bodies, to repair themselves. But I highly recommend, if you're not a good sleeper or you've been sleep deprived, to find ways to improve that. There are many, many different ways. We don't have time to go into all of that, but take some time to do that. And then stress management, right? Stress causes high levels of inflammation through stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, all of these things. When our bodies are in a chronic state of stress, whether it's high stress or low stress, our bodies are never able to repair or heal or rest. So you may have heard of our autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, which are our fight, flight, or freeze, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, and heal. If one is on, the other cannot work. It goes both ways. So if we are always stressed out, even at low levels, which is what most of us go through, our parasympathetic nervous system will never kick on. However, if we can get the parasympathetic nervous system to kick on, that rest, digest, and heal, then it automatically shuts down the fight, flight, or freeze. So how do we do that? The simplest ways, there's many ways to manage our stress. The simplest way is to take deep breaths. It is the quickest way, it is the cheapest thing to do, and it is the most efficient thing. So if you're ever feeling stressed, or even if you're not feeling highly stressed, taking time every day, actually throughout the day, to breathe deeply. Now, why does this work? We have a muscle in our body called our diaphragm, and it's our breathing muscle, and it sits horizontal, right at basically under our ribs, horizontal. Our diaphragm has a hole in it, and in this hole, we have vasculature, like our aorta, our arteries or veins, and our vagus nerve runs through that hole. The vagus nerve, it's the 10th cranial nerve, it's the most complicated nerve, cranial nerve in our body, runs from our head to our gut, and it takes care of a lot of our organs' needs. When we take deep belly breaths, okay, not just breathing, a lot of times we just breathe into our collarbones, or our shallow breathing, but when we breathe, so you can put your hands on your ribs, and I want you to take a deep breath in, and make your ribs open up a bit, and then exhale and feel your ribs come together. In, open, and exhale. When you breathe like that, we mechanically stimulate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve turns on the parasympathetic nervous system right away. So that is why breathing deeply automatically brings your blood pressure down, your heart rate down, sense of calm. So when the next time you're feeling stressed out, or even if you can't sleep, try some deep breaths, and that should help. And then lastly, lots of research is coming out now on the importance of gratitude and our mindset. And so working on a feeling of having gratitude every single day. Maybe you write it down in the morning, maybe you write something down in the evening. And having a mindset of abundance in your life as opposed to lack or scarcity, or like there's never enough time, or there's never enough money, or whatever that type of mindset is, versus thinking how grateful we are for the things we have. Just that simple little shift makes a huge impact on our stress level. So it goes back to the stress level. And then that in turn lowers our inflammation, and that in turn increases our longevity. So
Mind over matter. On the breathing though, what about, they advocate stomach breathing, that deeper breathing. Is that not as good?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. For what?
Stomach breathing into your stomach, into your second brain, your gut, when you breathe, deep breathe, I mean, it's more shallow breathe when you go in your chest, but it's deeper when you go into the stomach area.
Yeah, so that,
isn't that just as good?
yeah. So that belly breathing is using your diaphragm. I just had you put your hands on your ribs because that's where you can feel it. But yeah, if you're breathing into your belly, it's definitely making that diaphragm work. Yeah, so we want to breathe deep into our belly. All right, so finishing up, here is my mantra: anti-aging is BS. If you take nothing else away from here, if we are not aging, we are dead. So we don't want anti-age. We want to age well. And if we incorporate these different things, we can decelerate the aging process, and as opposed to accelerate the aging process. And so this is one of my main goals in my life, is to have people's mindsets shift about anti-aging. People will say, oh, you must know all about anti-aging. No, anti-aging is a lie. You're dead if you're not aging. We want to be aging. We want to age well. So thinking of that, and it's never too early to start, and it's never too late to start. So whether you're 40 or 70 or younger or older or anywhere in between, like, we can always, our bodies are dynamic, our brains are dynamic. We can be working on these things no matter what age we're at. So we only have one life to live. We need to make it joyful, vibrant, and make it count. And these 4 pillars, if you incorporate them, will have huge impacts over your lifetime. So thank you. Again, there's my information. If you are interested in reaching out to me, I work with all kinds of people one-on-one and groups on various different levels. And I just really appreciate you, Brian, for putting this together and inviting me.
Great. And first thing I want to say is that I am very grateful for having you as part of my life and part of and sharing this. It's something that over the last few years I've come to appreciate, like gratitude, right? And lowering stress. So definitely, and for me, it's also more meaningful, which is why I have an OsteoStrong, because I love to see my clients basically get well. Like they come in and maybe not as healthy, but after a few months, they're just like, it's night and day. And I can see that. And for me, it brings me a lot of satisfaction and just meaning. And then the same thing with my team. They really enjoy the work just because they see the results.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then that is, not only are you helping others, but you're also helping yourself, because you're bringing into the pillar number 3 and that connection to a deeper purpose and meaning, right? So if we are helping others, that brings us much fulfillment in life. And so, yeah, that's part of the reason you and I have had this discussion before, Brian, like, why am I not in academia, sitting in front of a computer in a dark dungeon in a lab, biomechanics lab? And that's just it, because I have so much more fulfillment when I am working with people, when I'm seeing smiling faces and not just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. Like, that just about killed me for the 5 years I was in my doctoral program. And that was not good for my longevity. So I had to find that out. But yeah, so finding fulfillment in what you do and meeting is huge. Thank you so much, everyone. I wanted to, just Samantha asked a question about how is hiking different than biking. So hiking actually is I would say cognitively complex, because you're not just walking. Usually when you're hiking, you're on a trail. You have to pay attention to where your footing is, right? Maybe you have a cliff on one side or a mountain on another. We're in LA, so there's rattlesnakes you're having to look for. So hiking is actually you're very involved. Unless it's just like a plain dirt road, like a fire road or something, then that would be considered more like walking and automatic. But yeah, this has been great. And you are welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Rattlesnakes. Yeah. Have you not been hiking and seen a rattlesnake in LA yet? Kidding.
That sleep factor, though, how much, do you really have to have 8 hours? That's tough to find 8 hours. So 8 hours of concentrated sleep.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's different for everyone. Typically, it's somewhere between 7 and 9 hours.
9 hours.
7 and 9. Yeah. And Yeah. And if anyone needs 9 hours, I want you to not be judgmental on yourself, and you own it. And you own those 9 hours, because that's going to keep you living long if that's what you need. I need 7.5 hours. I know that's what I need about my body. And if you sleep less than 6 hours and just think you're a, low sleeper or whatever it's called, like you don't sleep a lot, only 2% of the entire human population are considered genetically those who sleep less. I don't know why the term is falling out of my head, if anyone knows it, but only a very small percentage of the population can get by on less than 6 hours of sleep. If you are thinking you can, you're actually not functioning as well as you could be. You're leaving money on the table. That's what I'll tell you. You're leaving brain function money on the table. So find what your specific timing is for sleep. Now, I will say, as people get older, they tend to not sleep as much. A lot of that is because they're not as active during the day. Not everything, not everybody, but sometimes that's it. And so you might have to, if you're finding that as you get older, your sleep is disrupted or not as good, there's a lot of different things that could be adding to that, right? And we don't have time to go through all those things right now. Feel free to email me and we can talk about it. But it could be certain habits that are happening during the day or in the evening that are keeping you from getting that sleep that you need.
But when you sleep, if you get a full 7 hours, but you've gotten up during the nights 2 or 3 times, then that doesn't count. I mean, that's not 7 hours then, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, if you get up, are you able to fall right back to sleep?
I get up and drink some water. I get up and just take it off the nightstand, but then I go, I think I'll go to the bathroom. And depending on, most of the time I can go back to bed, but there are some, when I have a lot of things on my mind, then that's when but I don't count those as sleep, as nights of sleep. But I'm just curious if you just take a minute, like twice during the night, to get up and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Does that knock off an hour of sleep?
Well, it depends. I want to say, like, anytime you disrupt your sleep is going to be a disruption. Yes. So if you can get a full, like, 6 or 7 hours or 8 hours, whatever that is, that's good. If you can't, even taking naps during the day, you might find helpful. Okay. So it's not going to be as good as getting a solid 7 hours. So you just have to play. Like, maybe you need to drink less or drink a little bit more before you go to bed. When we go to sleep, we lose a lot of hydration, because when we breathe, we lose.
I don't drink enough, and I have to drink water during the day, and I don't. And so that's why I get so thirsty at night, and I just my mouth gets so dry and everything.
Yeah.
But the REM sleep is the most important, correct?
It depends on what you're talking about. All the sleep. There's 3 sleep cycles, and they're all in.
Dream, they say that's the REM sleep, and that's actually the deeper sleep.
Yeah. But you have to go through the first 2 to get there. So they're all very important. But yeah, when I work, this is for everyone, when I work with my clients, that is the number one thing we work on is hydration. And a lot of people don't realize how dehydrated they are. So I encourage everyone to look at their hydration levels and take care of those, because that's
water with you all day. Keep water on your desk all day.
Bottle all day. Keep filling it up. Yep.
Even the gym, I used to take it, but now you have to wear a mask, and so and you can't. They don't have fountains because you have to have a mask on all the time, and so I just never think about it because I'm always busy running around. But I have to. But
yeah.
You have an office here in Torrance or something?
I'm in Hermosa Beach.
Oh, you are?
And I work with people mostly online now anyway.
Oh.
I have clients all over the world. Sorry?
Okay. I'm in Hermosa too, so I'll have to send you an email.
Perfect.
And I can ask you questions without taking all your time.
Yeah, so I appreciate we've gone over the hour. I know you all dedicated an hour, so I want to thank you so much. But yeah, if you have questions, please reach out to me. Samantha said, I've had a couple CEOs I've worked for say proudly that a lot of geniuses don't need sleep much, so they align themselves with that. Yeah, and that's a bunch of bullshit. And yeah, that's like the opposite of genius. And if people are thinking that way, just know they're gonna die early, and don't follow that. Like, there's so much research now that shows that the most productive people actually sleep. And a really great book to read is Sleep Revolution by Arianna Huffington, because she was one of these people who was only getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep. She wound up falling and breaking her face, and it really opened her mind to how important sleep is. And so yeah, there's right. We live in a society that is proud to be busy and not sleep well. So that's why I said, if you need 9 hours of sleep, like, don't judge yourself for it. Own it and be like, this is what I need to be the best that I can be and to live the fullest life I can live. Maybe you only need 7 hours. That's cool too. But the sleep is one of the most important things. And now we're finding that. And you can read a lot of world leaders now talk about the importance of sleep. CEOs like of really big companies, same thing. So yeah, if people are proud of not sleeping, just know that that's not good. Oh, Marco says there's a book called Sleep Smarter, and that's a good book. All right, I'll look that up. I haven't heard of that one. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll definitely bring you back on. The 4 pillars had so many things packed into it that each one could be like over an hour. Right?
For sure.
And we've had conversations. I can also talk for hours about sleep. Actually, sleep is my #1 biohack of anything, because if you don't sleep well, then you don't function well for the rest of the day. And then making sure you're drinking, and then what you eat. So definitely more to talk about. So everyone, I have the next Strong Talk for Aussie Strong is December 3rd. So in 2 more weeks, we have a Dr. David Wong, who's also a local practitioner here. I think Mona, you know who he is. He's been an MD here for 40 years in Torrance, but practices holistic integrative medicine. And he's going to be very dynamic in talking about bone health and hormones. So an interesting topic in 2 weeks. But yeah, if anybody has questions for Nicole, you can go ahead and email me or Nicole. I will have a recording of this. I will email it out so you guys can replay it, because there's definitely a lot of information here to digest. But that's it. So anything else, Nicole?
No, just thank you so much. And I'll email you this PDF. So when you send out the recording, if anyone wants the PDF of the presentation.
I missed the first 10 minutes because I couldn't get on. I kept trying to go in and Zoom, and they kept saying you have to have a password, and they didn't give us a password. Then all of a sudden, about 10 after, it let me in.
Well, we're glad you made it.
Yeah. All right. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Right.
We're all grateful. We're all grateful for this.
Bye-bye.